How much do you think drug lords make? Living a life of crime is one of the most dangerous things ever, but it also comes with a lot of power and money. So many crime bosses have insane net worths. It may be lucrative, but being a drug lord is not sustainable, as many of them have lost it all or are locked up behind bars. Here's a list of some of the highest cartel leaders' earners. Watch the video until the end for a shocking revelation, and you won't want to miss the most powerful and wealthiest drug lord in history. Joaquin Guzman. Kingpin Joaquin Guzman, also known as El Chapo, is one of the most notorious cartel leaders ever. Due to his small stature, he was nicknamed Shorty, but don't let his looks fool you. He's as dangerous and heartless as they come. El Chapo was a famous drug lord in Mexico. He was the leader of the Sinaloa cartel for a long time, an organization that oversaw many drug operations within Mexico and smuggled tons of illegal drugs into the US. Before he was finally caught and locked up in a high-security prison, El Chapo controlled a large portion of Mexico, and even fellow drug lords knew better than to mess with him. Forbes magazine even rated him as one of the most powerful people in the world every year from 2008 until he was captured in 2016. Before his arrest, he had a net worth of $1 billion, making him one of the wealthiest drug lords ever. However, all his accounts and assets have now been frozen. Although he's no longer in charge of the Sinaloa cartel, the establishment continues to carry on El Chapo's legacy. In fact, he still has some level of influence over some Mexican drug lords, but as for him, he's been sentenced to life imprisonment without possibility of parole. Miguel Angel Felix Gallardo. Another influential drug cartel leader is Felix Gallardo, also from Mexico, and some might even call him El Chapo's mentor. Together with his two friends Ernesto Fonseca Carrillo and Rafael Caro Quintero, he established the Guadalajara cartel, one of the largest drug cartels in North American history. In his days, he was referred to as the boss of bosses or the Godfather, and these titles were pretty spot on. In 1980, Gallardo and his partners got involved with a DEA special agent Enrique Kiki Camarena, assigned to Guadalajara. He ordered his underlings to kidnap, torture, and kill Camarena, and this led to the DEA intensifying their investigation of the drug lord and his partners. It took 9 years, but Felix Gallardo was finally captured and sentenced to 40 years in prison and an additional 37 years. But if the agency thought this would stop him from running his drug empire, they were sorely mistaken. Although he was in prison, Felix remained one of the biggest drug traffickers in the world. But how did he manage to pull it off? He used the mobile phone in prison. This way, he maintained contact with his organization, giving them instructions and running the cartel behind bars. He finally decided to split the cartel into two smaller ones under different names to reduce the attention they had been getting from law enforcement workers. According to Felix's instructions, Guadalajara cartel was divided into Tijuana cartel and Sinaloa cartel. After being in prison for 4 years and making millions of dollars from his establishments, he was moved to a high-security prison, losing all connection to his underlings. Felix is 77 years old now, and because of his declining health, he's been moved from the hostile prison environment to house arrest. Like El Chapo, he has no access to all the billions he amassed as a drug lord. Juan Garcia Abrego. Juan was another powerful drug lord in Mexico, and the founder of one of the oldest cartels in the country, the Gulf Cartel. Usually, he worked on his own to smuggle illegal drugs into the US, but sometimes he got help from other big cartels in Colombia. With him as the leader of the Gulf Cartel, Juan earned billions of dollars annually throughout the 90s until he was caught in 1996. Before then, however, Juan became the first Mexican listed on the FBI's list of the 10 most wanted criminals. In addition, he controlled an army of soldiers recruited to protect the cartel. Juan also had several government officials in the palm of his hands, controlling them with bribes and making things easy for his organization. He really was a powerful man with billions of dollars at his disposal until he lost it all. He was found guilty of 22 charges and sentenced to life imprisonment. After he left the drug trafficking scene, Gulf Cartel was passed on to his son Osiel Cardenas Guillen, who was arrested in 2003 and is currently serving jail time as well. Now, the Gulf Cartel is dissolved into different gangs, which is no surprise. No one has been able to fill in the gap as Juan did. Al Capone. Al Capone is another unforgettable name in the history of crime in the United States. Also known as Scarface, Capone was a notorious gangster who was involved in a long list of criminal activity and the founder of the Chicago-based criminal organization Chicago Outfit. His criminal reign lasted only 7 years, but he left a huge mark and was even named Chicago's public enemy #1. Capone was prominent during the 20s. Throughout the decade, the empire he oversaw was involved in all manners of crime, including drug trafficking, gambling, prostitution, illegal alcohol production, bribery, robbery, extortion of small-scale businesses, and murder. He had a net worth of over $100 million in 1927, which is equivalent to roughly $2 billion today. Having all the wealth and power back then, the man had all of Chicago worried for their lives, but that ended when he was finally convicted of his crimes in 1931. He was thrown in jail, but he only spent 8 years before he was released due to health complications. Capone was diagnosed with neurosyphilis, complication of the STI, and his mental and physical health had deteriorated seriously before penicillin was available for purchase. He finally died in 1947 in his Florida mansion, and he managed to store away hundreds of millions of dollars for his descendants. Jonathan Almanza Orejuela and Jose Santa Cruz Londono. Jonathan and Jose founded Cali Cartel, the main competition for Pablo's Medellin cartel. Unlike other drug trafficking establishments on this list, Cali Cartel seemed like a regular business establishment on the surface. But underground, they were involved in nasty crimes like counterfeiting, kidnapping, and importing cocaine from Peru and Bolivia to Colombia. Their establishment outlived their competition, and the Cali Cartel brothers earned hundreds of millions before being captured in the 90s, imprisoned, and sentenced to a lifetime in prison. Just like other captured drug lords, they lost access to all their fortune. Frank Lucas. Frank Lucas was another popular drug lord, one of the most popular ones ever. So popular, a movie narrating the events of his life was made. He operated between 1960 and 1970 in New York, but he was most popular for smuggling heroin into the US all the way from Asia without using any middleman. Frank wasn't the richest drug lord ever, but the ideas he thought up in his head were simply mind-blowing. He bragged that he had smuggled it using the coffins of fallen American soldiers who died in service in Vietnam. He made hundreds of millions from selling hard drugs, and the fact that he didn't work with middlemen all the time meant more money for him. However, he was finally caught and convicted in the late 70s. He was sentenced to 70 years in prison but served only 5, a reward for selling out his colleagues. He and his family were placed in the witness protection program, but he returned to his old ways and ended up in prison again. Frank was in and out of jail for the remainder of his life, losing most of his net worth. At the time of his death in 2019, he had a net worth of a little over $500,000. Manuel Noriega. Manuel Noriega was not your average drug lord. He was referred to as General Noriega, a CIA agent and former dictator of Panama who used his positions to sell and transport illegal drugs across North America. In the 1950s, Noriega worked with several U.S. intelligence agencies, including the CIA, and he was an invaluable source of information, especially regarding drug-related crimes. Over the next 30 years, however, his involvement with the agency reduced drastically, automatically making him the center of a drug crime investigation. Back in his home country, Panama, Noriega became the dictator, giving him the perfect opportunity to smuggle drugs, steal money, build a drug trafficking empire, and he managed to build a fortune out of it. When the U.S. invaded Panama in 1989, his millions of dollars could not save him, and he was captured as a war prisoner. He was tried and convicted for several crimes, including drug trafficking, racketeering, and money laundering. Ultimately, he was given a 40-year sentence in America, and he served a 6-year sentence in Paris. He could not serve the full term due to his brain tumor diagnosis, and he died early due to complications after surgery. Pablo Escobar. This list would be incomplete without mentioning Pablo Escobar, the king of cocaine. Single-handedly, he established and led the Medellin cartel, one of the biggest cartels in Colombia. In addition to being a powerful drug lord, Pablo was also a politician, which meant he had so much power and high immunity to law enforcement. Under his leadership, Medellin cartel monopolized cocaine sales in the U.S. between 1980 and the early 90s. He made history by becoming the richest drug lord in the world with a net worth equivalent to over $70 billion at the time of his death. Because of his success, Pablo's criminal career was constantly threatened by U.S. forces and his rival drug lords, so he was on the run for a few years. Finally, in 1991, he surrendered to the authorities but escaped after barely a year. Unfortunately for Pablo, being on the run was not good for business, and the Medellin cartel collapsed abruptly. He was killed in his hometown by the Colombian police, and although his death was a breath of fresh air for many people, namely the US and Colombian law enforcement, however, so much more people mourned his loss. He might have been a dangerous drug lord, but he spent so much money on his community and was loved for it.